Hello again, everybody. This is Mr. Everything, and I'm coming at you with another Wargaming in miniature video. In this video, we are going to be painting these Perry Miniatures dismounted light Dragoons with rifles. And I've got 2 packs of these, so they come in packs of 6. So I've got duplicates. Everything's got 2 figures, right? Okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put these together as skirmishers for my Princeton project. But I want to give you the opportunity to see me paint them. So now I'm only going to do 8 models for the skirmisher unit. The other 4 models I'm going to use in my wagon baggage train as escorts. So they're just going to be walking along the wagons and things like that. So, but I am going to paint them all at once. All right, the first thing you need to do is using an X-Acto knife. When you take them out of their package, even though they are Perry's and they're extremely highly detailed models, these models, let me zoom in so you can see exactly how detailed these are. Okay, right here we're looking at light. Now this is not even primed yet. This is just bare metal. All right, so one of the very first things you're going to want to do is take your X-Acto knife and you're going to want to go over the model, find out if there's any flash. Like right there, I had to cut a little flash off of that. Off this canteen, I had to cut a little flash off of this. The bases were lousy with these little flash pieces sticking off of them. And you got to make sure you have a flat base. Now some people like to use a file. I'll just drag my knife across the bottom to clean up the bottom. Okay, that's him. I'm going to show you each style. Okay, see this piece right here that's hanging off his backpack? You gotta get rid of it. And okay, so you gotta examine your model. Make sure you go over its entirety, underneath, everything. You've got these little pistols in their braces. This guy's got a powder horn. He's reloading. Well, I guess he's not reloading. He's priming his musket. They say they're using rifles, but okay. So that's the first thing you do is you make sure you go over your model with your X-Acto knife and clean off any flash or flare that you see or find. That way you won't have to do it after you prime these. Alright, so now once you get them primed, let's pull them off to this. I mean, after you get them cleaned, you do need to take these and wash them to get rid of, I mean, actually literally go into a sink with soapy water and wash them to get rid of any mold release that might be on these models. Alright, now once you've washed them and they've dried and you got rid of all the mold release, we go ahead and we're going to glue them to popsicle sticks. Now I've got these jumbo popsicle sticks. These are like over 1 inch wide, and I put 4 figures per popsicle stick. All right, so now you just take some PVA glue. Simple. Then you just take these guys and you place them on the PVA glue. Don't worry about it. The PVA is going to shrink and it's going to affix that figure to the stick, but it's not going to be permanent. All right, so then you let that dry It's going to take a few hours to dry, and then what I'll do is I'll prime it black with some spray primer. I use flat black or matte, depending on the brand that I use, but usually I'll use like a Krylon or a Rust-Oleum spray primer. And then once that's primed, it probably will be tomorrow before I actually start painting on these. So you'll see me in just a second. All right, guys, we're back. We've got these guys primed. I sprayed them a couple of times, both light times, very light coats. But you can see under, like where, because it's sitting on a board when I'm priming it, I can't actually get the primer to spray up into there. You're also probably not ever going to see that on a gaming table, but just in case, what I like to do is take licorice. I'll water it down because I don't want it to be excessively thick. I want it to be very thin. And I choose licorice instead of a flat black because licorice has a bluish tint to it, super subtle. It's almost black, but not quite. So, and then I use my 2 brush, my 2O brush, and I'll go into all these areas, and I will just ensure that everything has a black coat on it. And because it's watered down and very thin, it should get down into all the cracks and crevices without caking up or distorting any of the quality or details of the models. Okay, now you might be noticing that I use a variety of different paints. I have folk art paint, which I really like, that has a strong pigment and goes on well, and plus you get a giant bottle for the same cost that you would get something like a Vallejo paint. Now actually probably half the cost, like maybe $1.50, where this is like $3. Now, but I also like Vallejo paints because they have some pigments that you can't find in folk art, and I also use Model Master paints. I use all kinds of paints, so I have probably 20 different brands of paints that I use. So don't get caught up on what paint is what paint, or what brand is what brand. Just kind of understand the different colors and tones that we're using and how we're getting it on the model. All right, so now my next step is we're gonna do a very light coat of flesh on their hands and faces, and I'm using light flesh, a very light flesh. All right, for this next step, I like to use a fairly large brush, mainly because I just want to get my flesh paint on the model as fast as possible, and I also don't worry about it spilling over to the uniform or the helmet, because if it spills over, it's okay because I haven't painted those items yet, and I would cover any flesh that might have gotten onto the rest of the model. I correct any mistakes is what I'm trying to say. A lot of times when I paint transitions between one color and another, I will leave some of the black primer, or the black undercoat, shining through to give it a natural black line. Now, as you can see, I am painting bulk. I'm painting the whole, see I got that on a sling? That's okay. I'm really not even concerned. I'm also trying to reach around this camera. Yeah, and these other models keep getting in my way. And this would probably get in my way because I don't want to spin this around and knock something over. I turned off my autofocus because it was not focusing properly. So I set my focus to an area where I thought would be the best compromise. All right, so that is the base coat of the flesh, and let me go ahead and knock these other guys out, and then I'll be right back. Now, if you're curious about the models that we're painting here, these are actually Perry models. It's the 16th Light Dragoons dismounted with Tarletons. Colonel Harcourt, the commander of the 16th Light Dragoons, wanted his troops to be a little bit more versatile. So he created a detachment of dismounted Light Dragoons that were equipped to fight and trained to fight like light infantry. So in my game, I'm mounting these guys as skirmishers. Basically individually on bases. Alright, the next color I'm going to use is wicker white. It's basically a very pure white. It's a very white. And I'm using that instead of like an off-white or a linen or something like that. We're going to put that on the small clothes and the legs, down to the gaiters. The foot dragoons we're not wearing the same boots that the mounted dragoons were wearing. And I'm using a 3.0 brush. Now here there's a coat, a small coat underneath their main coat, and what I do is I accentuate the fact that there is going to be a black line between the two. Basically, I leave it automatically. And the reason why I didn't want to go with a linen or a dirty white is because I am going to put a wash on top of this, and when I do that, it's going to dirty it up automatically. I don't need to manually do that for the paint. I'm going to let the wash do that for me. This guy right here, he's my model. He's my demo model. He's the one that I'm showing you everything. All the other models are just for my unit. They're extra. Now, also, not only is the small clothes, which I haven't got to yet, are white, but the turnbacks are white as well. But I'm not going to paint the turnbacks white until after I wash, because I want my turnbacks to actually be a bright white. I don't want them to be a dirty white, like the leggings or the small clothes. So basically I'm going to have two whites on there. I'm going to have the whites for the legs and small clothes, and then a bright white for his turnbacks. Now the 16th Regiment had blue facings, so they're not white. So. Now these are not boots, these are gaiters, but I still want to leave a little bit of a gap. Okay, so that's what the leggings are going to look like. Now when I go to the small clothes, you got to pay particular attention not to go all the way to the bottom of the small clothes. You You got to leave a little bit of a gap. See that black gap there? There, perfect. Get underneath this quote-unquote rifle. Yeah, the Perry Miniatures page says that it's dismounted with rifles. I don't know if that's true. Okay, and see, and then you got like a little bit of a gap between the jacket and the pants and the vest and the pants. All right, perfecto. And you give me a few more minutes and I'll have all the other ones done too. I'll be right back. All right, so now we're going to continue on with the leg portion of the model, and we're going to go ahead and use dark sand from Vallejo to do the gaiters. Use my 3.0 brush again. Not to get it onto the shoes. I'm going to keep it off of the boot shoes, footwear, which is going to stay black. And then when I come up the leg, I'm going to hit just shy of the top of the gaiter. So you will actually have a black line. The thinner you can make that black line, the better. But that comes with experience on painting. Yeah, but a smaller black line is better. But a black line is better than not having a black line at all. So, just practice. Okay, so you got your bottoms of the leggings, or I should say the gaiters. Now let me go ahead and finish that on all the models and I'll be right back. So now the only thing that's red on this model is his jacket. Remember, he's got blue facings. So his collars, his cuffs, and his lapels are all going to be blue. His turnbacks are going to be white. Now, Imperial Red is not a really bright red. It's kind of a deep red. Or kind of like a dark red, if you'd like to call it that. Now once I wash this, the red's going to get even darker. that's okay. This red is really just the base, and this is what will be under the undercoat. Because when I highlight it, it's going to bring out the brightness of the red. Again, don't worry about getting it on the straps, because the straps are all going to be painted after I wash. And red is one of the three colors that doesn't like to cover black. A lot of times, like, I'll paint white underneath red to bring out the brightness of the color. But in this case, I don't need to do that because I'm going to be highlighting over a wash. Alright, now you can kind of see how that's starting to darken up as it dries. Alright, so let's continue on, and then I'll be back when I get them all red. Alright, so the next step is for me to use true blue on their facings. Now I'm using a 20-0 brush to do this. Go ahead and work with the model. This is an odd angle for me to paint. I'm looking over the webcam. My arms are wrapped around the webcam. And I got the webcam on a tripod. And there's a handle on the tripod that's poking me right in the chest. So I can't get too close to the model. I'm actually a mile away from the model. And I have to turn the model to make sure lighting from my lamp is hitting it. Yeah, that looks good. Now let's get the jacket. I guess I should call that a coat, right? It's a red coat. I'll do is I'll take my brush and I'll put it under the chin, under the throat, and then I'll drag the brush, and letting the paint fall off as I drag the brush. Collars and cuffs and lapels. Alright. Let me go ahead and finish that on the rest of these guys, and then I'll be right back. Alright, now the next color, we're going to go ahead and use this tan yellow, and we're going to paint the haversack. It's basically their lunch bag, their bag that they carry all their personal belongings in. Anything... Basically, it's an anything bag, and these models have them underneath their canteens. Let's go ahead, and I'm using a 3.0 brush. And with the haversacks, what I like to do is paint the top flap. Right, and then I will paint the bottom bag and leave a little gap between either the canteen or the top flap, so it accentuates the fact that there's actually a flap there. That's the top flap. And then the baggie. Kind of like that. Alright, let me finish all these haversacks and then I'll be right back. Okay, now there's two things that I'm going to be painting using the Model Master acrylic wood, right? It's a very light brown. There's two things I'm going to be painting that color. I'm going to be painting their powder horn and also their brace, because every one of them looks like they're carrying a pistol as well. My model is the one that's actually using the powder horn. Looks like he's using a powder horn to prime his musket. Still leaving a black line between the hand and the powder horn. Got a few more of those powder horns to do, and then I'll be back. Oh, before I do that, let's go ahead and paint his brace of pistols. That guy doesn't have a brace of pistols. Okay, so they all don't have pistols. None of them on this bar do. Okay, so when I get a guy with pistols, I'll be right back. Alright guys, so like this guy's got a brace In the modern days, you would call that a holster. And he has a horn tucked up underneath his arm right there. All right, and the last color I used before we would do the wash is I'm using burnt sienna. I'm using that on all the wood parts, like the musket and the pistol handles. All right, that's our model. Which basically, when it comes to a musket, I do the three sides. I do the side facing you, the side not facing you, and the bottom. I don't bother doing the top because that's where I'm going to put the steel. But I'll do that after the wash. There you go, just like that. And he doesn't have a pistol. This is the model before it is washed. I did go ahead and paint his hair brown as well. I painted about 2/3 of the model's hair is brown, left the other one's black. Alright, so now we're just going to let this dry for a minute. It's because I don't want to wash it while the paint is dry. I don't want to wash it while the paint is wet, because then the paint will bleed all over. I don't want to do that. So here, just take a couple of looks at these before we start washing. See, there's a brace. There's another brace. And then once I finish washing, remember we still have highlights after that. Okay, now that these guys are dry, and we took a look at them just a moment ago, but now what we're going to do is we're going to do my base coat, but we're also going to seal them, polyurethane, and dip them all in one using the Varathane stain and poly. It's very similar to maybe the army painter dips that you've seen out there, or the poly shades. This is just the Rust-Oleum version of it. This is antique walnut. I think I would rather use pecan. Pecan's a little bit lighter shade than this. This is kind of a darker shade, but this is what I've done all my American War of Independence in. I've used this shade right here. Using a fairly sizable brush, we're going to start off with that model right there. So that you can see what I'm doing here. I'm dipping the brush. I'm not dipping the model into the thing, even though that has been done, and that's really why it's called dipping. But what I do is I apply the dip to my model, right? And I want to make it thick enough that it runs. I want it to run down the model and onto the base. but I don't want it to be so thick that it's just 100% brown, right? Okay. I know it looks horrible right now. It looks like it's completely brown and dark and dingy, but you give it about 12 to 24 hours, and once it dries, that brown will have run, most of the brown will have run off of the model, but it will only have get caught up in the smaller areas in the model and enhance all of the creases and folds of the cloth and the flesh. It's a great flesh wash, actually. But because it's a polyurethane, it stays extremely sticky for a good long time, almost 24 hours. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and continue on and stain or dip these models, and once they're dry and we're ready to go on to the next step, which will probably be tomorrow night after our game, I'll be right back. So I'll be back in just a few minutes.